Hello, and welcome to the Mime Radio Show. I'm Karen Hoyer.
And I'm James Donlin. And the man behind the curtain in that black frame around us is Michael Diaz, our engineer, producer, glue man, fix-it-all. He's the one that pulls the buttons, or pushes the buttons, pulls the levers, and we're so grateful to him. Today, we have a wonderful guest from Serbia, which is in that very interesting part of the world, east of Italy, and I think it's a land and a region that most of us should try to get to at some point. It has a long history. It's the center of civilization, or close to, at least. So let me read you about Marko Stojanovic, who is the co-founder and president of the World Mime Organization, as well as a performer, an actor, a teacher, a manager, a really wonderful man with an amazing career. Marko Stojanovic is co-founder and president of the World Mime Organization, devoted to creating a global network promoting and establishing mime as a mainstream art form. The WMO endeavors to educate people of all ages about the craft, rich history, cultural relevance, and social impact of world mime. In his native Serbia, Marko has played leading roles in numerous TV series, sitcoms, and TV films. And I say numerous, if you look at his CV, on regional, national, and satellite broadcasts throughout the whole country. He has acted in theater throughout Europe and appeared at many international festivals like Edinburgh, Avignon, and Stuttgart. Marko has received many national awards for acting in comedy and for contributing to the cultural development of children in his country. He is the 2021 winner of the Golden Badge Award of the Cultural and Educational Association of Serbia for selfless, dedicated, and longstanding work and creative contribution to the spread of culture. In his own words, quote, "I work with many people of different backgrounds, cultures, abilities, and disabilities, such as hearing impaired children and children with cancer." So let's welcome Marko Stojanovic. Ta-da.
So glad to have you here, Marko, all the way from Serbia.
Belgrade, right? Belgrade. How do you guys pronounce it in Serbia? What would be the accent? Pardon?
Beograd.
Belgrade. Uh-huh. Yeah.
Which means white city.
Yeah.
White city.
Yeah.
That's interesting because Chicago in the time of the Columbian Exposition World's Fair was called the White City because it was a beautiful creation of architecturally white buildings.
Well, I think that Chicago is the second largest Serbian city in the world.
Is that true?
We have a huge, there's a huge Serbian population in Chicago.
That's wonderful. That's fantastic.
Well, yeah, we should do one of the world conferences in the World Mime Organization conferences in Chicago.
That would be wonderful.
Yeah.
I was a couple of years ago. I had a show. I played for Serbian community there.
Wow.
Not a couple of years ago. That was like maybe 12 years ago or so.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, we're really excited to hear about your life and your career and what you're doing now. And
thank you.
So, I know of you mostly through these interviews that we've been doing on Facebook Live, which is how James and I got to know you. And I know that you've also done quite a few very funny comic videos and lots of film work and television work, but specifically for live performances, which, lately we haven't had the chance to do those during the pandemic times, but putting yourself back to that moment right before you step onto stage, how do you prepare yourself? Do you have something that you say to yourself or something that you think to get ready to go on stage?
Yeah, that moment, that little second before the lights come on and the public views you.
Well, I do something that I was teaching my students also. I breathe in and go for it. So it's like you need to have an impulse for everything that you're doing in your life. So that a burst of energy to start something, and the simplest impulse is just breathe in and go.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, release of the energy.
Yeah, what people usually do, they they have stage fear. I mean, all of us, we do it on a larger or a smaller scale, but usually people do to relax. They go like they breathe out, which is nice, but you cannot start anything when you breathe out. Plus, your spine is not and your back are not in the proper position. You have your muscles don't have the energy. You need oxygen to digest sugar so that you would have immediate energy in your muscles. So you have to breathe in. So the best way is breathe in and go.
Wow. And does the profile or the kind of audience in front of you like change that ritual, or is that constant? Or does it change with someone if it's
No,
kids or
that's my personal. So I mean, the audience also expects to see the beginning, to know where things start, whether it is a lecture or a show. They need to know when things start and when things end. So that's really important to know when is the beginning and when is the end, and possibly the applause at the end.
And
Marko, what is your relationship to the audience? Do you like to be able to see your audience? Do you want to? So do you have a direct connection during, like if you're performing a strict mime piece, do you connect with the eyes of the audience?
Yes, I do. I like watching people in the eyes, and I know that there are teachers that teach you to not to look the audience in the eyes, try to look above their heads or whatever. But I like the eye contact, and even if you have a person that is yawning in the audience, that is sleeping or playing with the phone nowadays.
Yeah, you know, I always say that the eyes and the fingertips or the fingers or the hands are the extensions of your nervous system. It's your brain, you know, so those eyes are so important. It's almost like some kind of ethereal relationship, you know, with the eyes meeting is actually the nervous system, you know, meeting it.
Acting is communication, so you have to communicate. I mean, you have to see what other person is thinking and how you are doing through their reactions. So even persons that are reacting like that, like yawning or sleeping or playing with the phone, they are your friends because they're giving you a valuable information that you're doing something that is boring, so you have to change something. I mean, thank you for that information. So yeah, I like watching people in the eyes, and I was fortunate enough that during my career I did a lot of comedy, and that's kind of a genre where I feel at home. So I was improvising a lot, and people here know me as an actor who likes to improvise. Even in I played in Grease, for instance, the musical, for like 5 years or so, almost 100 shows, and even there I was improvising. So I mean,
you know, in a sense, someone who improvises, that's a very quick and agile and developed brain. That's a person that can do that, because you can't improvise without being connected to the universe. So, you know, I think the audience appreciates improvisers and feels the value of it, whether it's technical or not, because that is the meeting of the brains. The improviser can meet the brain of the audience. Who is that audience to you? Now, here's the question. So as a group, is the audience a force to challenge, a force to embrace, a force to defy, or to, convince of something? Like, what is that out there, that life, that energy of the audience, you know, in a general sense to you?
Well, that really depends first on the show, and then also on the audience. It's never the same audience every night, so it's different. But the general thing that you have to establish as an actor is trust, because the audience comes to theater voluntarily, asking you to perform, to establish an illusion for them. Mm-hmm. And to be able to believe in that illusion, you have to be open. so they are vulnerable. The audience is vulnerable, so they have to trust that you won't be hurting them in any way. So I guess that in first couple of minutes of a show, that's the first thing that you do. You establish the language, so that they know what genre it is, what kind of show, what kind of language will you be using in your show, not only verbally but also non-verbally, etc., etc. And there is that moment of trust, and when you gain their trust, you can do whatever you want. You become, for hour and a half or 2 hours, you become best friends, and you play as if they came to your home. And
I have a question. Let me just ask this question. So now you live in you're Serbian. You live in a very diverse part of the world. You know, many different cultures are in this area where you live, and I'm just wondering, would the audiences in the former Yugoslavia, Serbia, you know, Croatia, and all these places, Macedonia, Romania, would they have a particular wisdom because they've been exposed or been living in a different cultural melting pot? Is that something, as opposed to maybe a country that is a little more homogeneous, or an area that's a little more, do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, you can say that. Yes, I never thought of that, but I think that's not only here, but I guess in Eastern Europe in general. First of all, our colleagues, actors, directors, etc., they don't like the word entertainment, because that's not art. Art is art, and entertainment is entertainment. Entertainment is commercial. That's capitalist thing. It's not our thing. Which I don't agree with. I mean, I like the term "the art of entertainment," because even if you watch the tragedy, it shouldn't be boring. It should entertain you. Even if it is something sad, you are there for the illusion, as I said a minute ago. And the audience here was brought up in the same way. Well, I guess the older audience, I could say. Nowadays, kids that were brought up on internet, Instagram, YouTube, etc., they don't have that kind of patience. They have a span of like 30 seconds to maybe up to 3 minutes of patience. And if you in that time span, if you're boring and not entertaining them in any way, pop, they will go away. So, which is good. I mean, it's great. It's great. I love that kind of relation. You know, you have, you know, immediately if what you're doing is good or not good, if you're relating to your audience or not.
And as mimes, the modern mime needs to understand that. I think that the attention spans are possibly different, you know, and that's a challenge for the art of mime, I think, which we can talk about later, you know. Yeah.
I want to go back to a little bit about what you talked about, the relationship with the audience, and forming that relationship of trust right at the beginning. How long did it take you to really articulate that, to figure that out, that that's exactly what's happening in that moment?
Oh, I don't know. I've been in professional acting for like 31, 32 years now. I'm 50. So, and I started my studies. I actually went to the university earlier. I was accepted when I was like 16 and a half. So I got my bachelor's degree when I was 20, and I started acting professionally already during my studies when I was like 18 or so. I guess it took me 30 years or I guess, I don't know. In the beginning, it was a game for me, and it was fun. And I think that as actors and mime artists or whatever, that, I mean, we're all the same. We are actors. We're acting on stage with voice or without voice. It doesn't really matter, with words or without. You can't lose that part, to have fun on stage and to enjoy yourself and to transfer that kind of positive energy to the audience. But it took me some time to understand that kind of friendship between actors on stage and all the people that are making a show, not only actors and the audience. Yeah, I guess it took me 30 years.
It's I just had a thought.
Tell us how
Yeah,
you
go ahead.
began to choose to do mime and physical theater. After studying acting and theater, how did you go along that path?
I didn't choose. I was chosen.
Ah,
Excuse me. As I said, I was really young when I was accepted at the university. When I passed the audition, etc., etc. And I had a professor. His name was Max Jankovic. He was a professor of stage movement. That's a subject that we have during 3 years of studies. I think they have it now for 4 years. So our bachelor's degree is 4 years. And he was keeping me after classes. When we had a class with him, he was telling me like, "Hey, you kid, stay with me. I'll teach you a couple of movements of mime." And I said, "Phew." I mean, I was brought up to respect professors, and especially at those times, we didn't question anything. Not like kids today. Kids today always ask why. They always have that a question from hell. Why? Do this. Why? No, just do it. I mean, do it. You'll find out why maybe later or in the future. We at that time we had that kind of respect for professors. You don't ask why, you just do. So I was staying after classes, and he was teaching me mime. So he probably saw something that I didn't. I was very physical always. When I was a kid, I was very clumsy, very clumsy. My parents even took me to a doctor to see why
Really?
was I falling over. We had in Libya, we had like 3 steps to go up to our house and 3 steps going down, and I was falling all the time, up and down, falling all the time. So they took me to a doctor, and he told them, well, I have an official doctor's how do you say that?
a diagnosis?
Yes, that diagnosis. Yes, exactly. That I'm clumsy. So he told my parents.
That was the official diagnosis. Your boy is clumsy.
Yeah, it's just clumsy.
Send him to the circus.
But very physical. When I was and very loud. I liked films, and we in 1976 or 7 there was a film crew that came to Libya to film The Desert Lion, a film about one Libyan hero, and actually that was a producer of Halloween, the whole series of the film Halloween, and the director. So the film was with Irena Papas and Anthony Quinn. And we lived in the same area, so we became friends. And my father was very into technical stuff. He liked music and sound equipment, and we had all sorts of stuff at home to listen to really good music. But then we saw the first U-matic video player. Whoa! U-matic tapes. Those are like 1 inch wide tapes.
Yes.
And he wanted to buy it. But then after like a month or so, the producer of Halloween, I forgot his name. I'll find it. He bought the first VHS video recorder. Wow. So we bought that from him together with like tapes. So, and I was watching films all day long, and nothing else to do. The school, I went to Serbian school, well, Yugoslav school at that time, which was like 250 kilometers, 150 miles away from where I was living. So I was homeschooled. So I was watching films, those 20 tapes. So we had like The Wild Bunch on tape, had we had Party with Peter Sellers. We had Flying Machines. That was a funny film.
So film really influenced you quite a bit. I mean, your
Oh
sense
yes, yes.
of
So
drama
yeah,
and comedy and.
oh yeah. And then I started reacting scenes from those films at home. And later on, I loved to go to cinema. I was going. I even. Well, I think my record was like 6 films in one day in cinema.
Wow.
Oh my goodness.
Did you
Yeah.
ever redo the choreographed massacre in the Wild Bunch of the Mexican army falling? Do you ever, as a kid, I used to do one of my specialties was standing on my bed and conducting the national anthem. And then I would get assassinated at the end. I'd get shot, and I'd do a slow motion death off my bed when I was about 10 years old. You know, like.
Yeah. Later on, when I came back to Belgrade, I was 10. I started going to cinema, and that was 1980. So the films with Bruce Lee were very popular. And I have a younger sister. With whom you would be practicing Bruce Lee movements.
So,
those were fun times, yeah.
Marko, did you studied with Marceau in his school? Did that come after college?
Yes. I went there in 1991, just a couple of days after I received my diploma here from the University of Arts in Belgrade.
So this was before you had started your acting career. I know all the work you've done in regular films and acting. And did you study with Marceau before that period, before you really got your acting career going?
Yes and no. I already started acting when I was studying, like after my second year. That was not unusual, and it is not unusual. So people from theater come to see the directors and producers and managers of theaters, because all of the theaters here are repertory theaters, and especially at that time, all of those theaters were owned by the government, whether city government or state government. So, and received all their budget from
could a young actor be placed in one of these I know in some countries, you know, like Czech Republic, the graduates are placed in these repertory theaters in the nation.
That's what was happening at that time also. So they came to see our exams, and then they started picking young actors for small roles, couple of words here, couple of words there, you know, then bigger roles, etc., etc. So before I ended my studies, I already had like 4 or 5 professional shows, and I think 3 or 4 awards on some festivals here in Yugoslavia at that time. So I already kind of started my career, and there was a very avant-garde theater, which is still kind of avant-garde. It's called the Atelier 212 because it had 212 seats when it started. Now it has a whole building with much more seats.
Wow.
So what made you want to go to study mime with Marceau? And tell us a little bit about what that experience was like being in the school. How long were you there? What kinds of things did you do?
Yeah, I was there for a year. Marceau, his origins are also from Eastern Europe, so he kind of watched at us from Eastern Europe with in kind of a mild and friendly way, and understood some of the hardships of life in Eastern Europe. So he to a couple of us, like 4 or 5 of us from Eastern Europe, he gave the first year for free, so we didn't pay the school, which was wonderful. But I went there by chance. I did. I have a good friend with whom I studied, and we were kind of comic duo during our studies. So people were coming to watch what we prepared for our exams, and not only for exams of acting and theater, but also, which is unusual, they came to see our exams of stage movement and ballet, etc., because the word spread out that we were funny and that we do some unusual things, and that so people started coming to see us, and we did a parody on sports. We call it Bloody Sports. So that was a parody on sports, kind of the videos that you saw about curling. That's on the same style. So like clownesque, mimish, everything without words. We were also using our voices to produce all the sound.
Yes. Yeah. And who was that partner? And did you go to school together?
Yes, Rade Markovic, a good friend. He also writes now very well for television. A wonderful actor and a comedian. So we did people heard about Bloody Sports, and then they told one of our very famous theater directors, who was a selector of shows for the International Monodrama and Mime Festival in Belgrade. And he came to see us, and he said, okay, so that's 15 minutes. Can you make it longer, like half an hour, 35 minutes for the festival? So we did it, and we opened the festival in 1991. And then after the show, it was very funny, and it was even recorded and broadcasted on television. A professor from the university came, and she said, well, I didn't know that you were interested in mime. And she was working with our government, helping them with international cultural and educational cooperation, etc. And she said, well, I have a prospect, a brochure from Marcel School in Paris in my office. Would you be interested to go to Marcel School? And I said, yeah, sure, why not? It was an accident, really. And I went and passed the audition and stayed there for a year.
Well, was there a wide international profile of the students? Were they mostly from Europe at that time, or were they from all over the world?
Well, from all over the world. We had on my year, we had a good friend of mine, Ofer Bloom from Israel, with whom I started the World Mime Organization and the World Mime Day initiative. We are still very good friends. We visit each other when there is no corona. And we had a guy from Japan, Naoki Imuro. We had a bunch of course, of French people, Spain, United States. Wesley Brainard, he actually was accepted with us, but he came a year later to study.
What did you take away from that experience?
Bulgaria, Czech Republic, South America, Chile, I think. Quite, from different countries.
What did you take after this year? What did you take away? Did it influence you greatly? Yes. Or like to this day, when you look back, how has that time influenced you, and what were the lessons that you may have learned about yourself?
The most important thing is that it kind of opened my eyes to movement in general. So since then, I was working with really different people. And not only people in theater, but also in dance, show dance, hip hop, etc., with deaf children. I developed also some 20 years ago a program, a training for public speaking and public appearance and nonverbal communication, etc., for politicians, managers, etc. So I really worked with different people, and even with people that when I work with people that are doing something doing a movement that I do not know. So in a field that I'm not an expert in, even then I knew what their movement lacked, or what their movement was lacking, or how to bring them to do something and to do better, even though, as I said, I did not know the technique or whatever else. So it really opened my eyes to movement in general. I could understand movement, and I could I could bring people um, to do the movement properly, with proper energy, with proper motivation.
Sounds like it
That was
really,
the most important thing that I learned there.
it sounds like it really helped you develop your eye for your ability to see what needs to be edited or changed or developed.
Yes.
How do you like you're such a man of so many facets and sides, and this theme we were discussing before we went on the air, that you're really about communication, and the movement aspect, the gestural aspect is emphasized. But how would you define your art or what you do? How, if someone's at a party asks you what you do, what would you say to them?
Yeah. Uh, well, when the people interview me here in media, they always ask me how do I want them to sign me on screen, and I say always just say actor, and that's it, because I think that a lot of things are in that word, in that term actor, because you act, so which means that you do. So
Mm,
I'm not that much of a philosopher, or
really?
so because I learned to do, and if you don't do, nobody
Yeah.
can see it. So it's kind of making things out of nothing. And on the other hand, I like to.
Oh, sorry.
What?
Do you hear that?
Do you hear that music?
Ah,
Oh,
it's a little bit of music to tell you there's a gift for you.
However, the gift never arrived.
Oh, yeah, unfortunately.
but it will.
Okay.
I have to tell you what the gift is. Eventually, you will get it. It's a Mime microphone.
Oh,
Because we know that you, as the head of the World Mime Organization, are responsible for a lot of talking. Yes, exactly. See, you've already got one, right?
Yeah, you can
So,
add it to your collection. Yeah.
so our we have a mime museum where we have a huge collection of mime artifacts, and yours actually is that mime microphone that you thought you were going to need, but it turned out. So this is just sort of a way to sort of segue into you telling us about the World Mime Organization and what's your goal with that, and where is that going?
Yeah, it's so very interesting because you're talking about all these different facets of communication, and yet you're the founder of the World Mime Organization. So how does mime, in its classic sense and in its elusive modern sense or transitory sense, how does that fit in your brain, Marko's brain, to establish the World Mime Organization and fit with all the other things you do?
yeah. Well, I mean, I was always trying not to have a boring life, and I always had different
Are you
interests.
saying mimes are fun?
Yeah,
Everybody should know this. Everybody should know this.
but mimes are fun.
Yes.
Yes, they are, and especially, well, maybe not while they're working, but not all the time. Sometimes they can be also very, very nervous. But
Yeah, they take it too seriously sometimes. They take it. Yeah.
mimes are fun. Mimes are fun, and the idea with the World Mime Organization was, well, Arthur Bloom. I brought him here in 1998 to Serbia for a small tour, and we even played together. We had a charity event for children ill of cancer, and we played together in one night. He played his show, and after him, I played my show, and all the money that we raised on box office went to the children's ward of National Cancer Research Center here in Belgrade. At that time, so that was 1998, we spoke about it for the first time. We said, well, I mean, internet was already there in very kind of especially here in very moving in baby steps, So we were browsing. Well, we tried to browse a little bit the internet to see if there is an organization dealing with mime, and we found out that there isn't a World Mime Organization. So we said, well, we should do something about it. We should try to make it and try to bring at first our friends with whom we were studying at Marcel School, keep in touch and bring people together. And so nothing really special, and make mimes talk to each other. Especially because what I found out, I didn't know that really. I didn't have that experience or knowledge. But what I found out that in Marcel schools, that everybody is a soloist. It's kind of mime is a solo art, and it isn't.
Yeah, in the basement. We're in the basement, in the lonely street corner, whatever,
Yeah. And later on, what I found out also through trying to do some co-productions and cooperation with colleagues and artists, etc., is that everybody is trying to keep that 1 square meter of pavement of street where they are performing, and not let anybody in. And I was brought up in theater where everything is a team effort.
Right.
So I never did a monodrama. In my 30 years of experience, I never did a monodrama. I did a stand-up comedy show once in 2006 or 7. I even toured Canada and the United States for Serbian people there living there, but I never did a monodrama, which here, for instance, in Serbia and in Eastern Europe is quite unusual. So I was
just a second, Marko. When you say monodrama, that's not a word that we use, but it's specifically solo
one-person show. Yeah,
it's a great word. I like it.
Yeah.
So I never did it. I mean, as I said, it's quite unusual in Serbia and in Eastern Europe. Actors do it, especially if they don't have work. They do that, and they can tour, or they choose a piece which has to do something with, for instance, with lessons of literature and language in schools, so they can tour schools, etc., etc. I never did it. So for me, that was an unusual knowledge that I got from Marcel School, that everybody was trying to do solo mime parts, and I didn't understand why they don't do anything together, like with 2, 3 people or 5 people on stage. I understand that it's expensive and it takes time and it takes effort production wise, etc., but well, it was unusual for me. So from that logic, I spoke to Offer and said, well, we have to do something about it. I mean, especially with mime, which is such an international language, with at that time internet slowly coming into our lives, we can communicate in without large phone expenses, phone bills, etc., but through internet, etc. And we said we have to do something about it. We have to make people cooperate and tour. Even then, that was 1998. We were sitting in my living room and drinking coffee or tea. Or rakia, schnapps now. But and we were talking, what if he would be in Israel and I would be here on stage, and we would have ICQ was a chat app at that time. ICQ, I don't know if it still exists, and if he would be there and I would be here, and if we would have screens to see each other and cameras, but if we put all of that together in real time in virtual space, so that you would see a stage performance, but not on a real stage, but in virtual space, and so that we would have an audience like in ancient Greece, like 30,000 people, or maybe even 500,000 people, and everybody dollars to see us. So that would be perfect.
It sounds very much like this past year and a half of pandemic times, where Zoom theater and the ability to Zoom with each other became something that was so necessary for us to stay alive as artists. But
And
it
we
sounds
spoke
it's
about that in
yeah,
1998.
right.
How has the from that first chrysalis of idea in 1998 to now, how has the World Mime Organization, have the goals changed? I'm sure the
Well,
profile and the membership has changed, but
well,
what's
the membership, yeah, but the goals, no. The main goal is to make people talk to each other, to make mime artists talk to each other and see what happens. Some of them will visit each other and have a coffee. Some of them will maybe do a show together. One will help another tour in his country or her country. So, and it is happening. We established it officially in 2004 here in Belgrade. We wanted to do it in Israel, but it was less complicated and much cheaper to do it here in Serbia. So our laws are quite liberal in the field of non-governmental organizations, and so we did it here. And in first couple of years, it was mostly a local thing. I used it here to do some of the work that I was doing with deaf children, etc., etc. But then we said, okay, we have to do something with it. It's there. Nobody had the same, probably had the same idea, but nobody did anything about it in elsewhere in the world. So around 2010, yeah, something like that, we decided to revive it and to re-establish it, but properly on an international level. And we started the work. And then it was much easier because we already had emails and websites, etc., etc. And it slowly grew. Now we have members. We don't have like thousands of members, but we have 200 and something members from 5 continents. So last year we had our first member from Australia. We didn't have members from Australia for a very long time, but last year we had our first member from Australia, and the year before that, first member from Africa. So most of our members are from Europe and Northern America.
You know what I especially like is not only you on this Mime Radio show, and even the idea of the Mime Radio show is a product, a byproduct of the World Mime Organization, because me meeting you through the World Mime Organization has spurred these ideas. But one thing I like particularly about the World Mime Organization is the thought that, we all know the idea of mimes talking to each other. We all know there are very specific techniques and schools of thought in mime, and some of the people are very protective of each of those areas. But I particularly like the Mime World Organization's a philosophy that every technique counts. One is no better than the other, and everybody has a place. And if we could establish this idea of sharing and not valuing one particular style or profile any more than another, I think that's a fantastic thought to pursue,
And Marko, talk a little bit about the festivals that you've worked on, because my growing up, that was the way that mimes communicated. There were many festivals
and
when I just left college. Not as many now, but the festival is like an automatic meeting place for different artists.
It's a stew. It's a soup. It's like it's a wonderful soup with all the ingredients, the savory ingredients. Yeah.
Well, what we did in 2018, we established for the first time, we did the first World Mime Conference here in Belgrade. And the second one was in 2019, with the idea exactly of that, people meeting, talking to each other. Offer wanted to make it more like a festival, more like presentation of works, etc., and shows. But I was more into going into the serious part, like any other conference, like a science conference or any other conference where you have people, where you have lectures, etc., etc., so that we would show that mime, even among us, to show that mime artists and artists in general are not just especially mime artists are not street entertainers, and because mime became, well, it kind of came back to its Greek roots, to street art and street entertainment. But we wanted to show that mime should be taken seriously. Mime artists are doing wonderful work. It's not easy work. I mean, when you take out the voice, or at least the words, from somebody, it's not easy to express themselves only with their bodies and their faces and their muscles, and it's just not easy. It is
not easy.
The first language that we spoke, all of us, and I guess that because it's in our nature is to tell stories. So we're all storytellers. Humans are storytellers. So I guess that the first storytellers were mimes, and we wanted to talk about that, and we wanted to bring people together, and all of us experienced that. There are Marsoists and Decluists, Grotowskiists, and whatever other is like Martians, but Venetians, and it's kind of like we all of us were enclosed in techniques like almost like sects, like religious sects, and you go like, oh, Marceau, and oh, but it's not. We have to cooperate, and the main thing is we want to produce a good show and a great experience for our audience, and it doesn't really matter what technique you're using. You're using the technique that you know and that you feel comfortable with. And Marcel Marceau was doing what he knew and what he was comfortable with, and the crew, who was his teacher, was doing the same, and they were experimenting, and everybody is doing the same, all of us.
Do you find any resistance today with some of the practitioners to this thought? Or is that breaking down somewhat?
To be very honest, I was surprised that there was no quarrels and no fights during conferences, and everybody accepted that. And I guess they looked relieved when they accepted that idea. They really looked relieved, because suddenly they started believing in themselves and what they are doing. I mean, it's like any other product. I mean, there's an orange juice, and 100 factories are producing orange juice, but you prefer an orange juice from one factory. I prefer from another factory. So it's a matter of taste. It's a matter of what my body is, and my inner self is feeling well with, and what is good for me, what I think is good for me.
It sounds like one of your main goals then, right at the beginning, was that the art of mime would be taken seriously. Yes. As a specific art form. Do you feel like that is evolving and happening?
Yes, and I'm really happy about it. And I think people are really happy also, our members. First, they started communicating, and that's really important. Second, after our first World Mime Conference, some of them were traveling, and they rang up a person that they met in Belgrade, and they had a coffee, and they were taking pictures, selfies, and they were sending me selfies. So that really made me happy. And the third thing is, I think that I really do not want to take any credit for it, nor the World Mime Organization. Maybe it's because we started communicating, so we have now the information about what people are doing around the world. But it looks as if kind of general self-esteem of mime artists in general.
That's a good point. That's a very good point. The courage is coming out. Yeah, yes. Yeah. I hearing you talk, I want to work in your office.
Sorry?
Hearing you talk, I want to work in your office somewhere, some world headquarters of the World Mime Organization,
We don't have
because,
enough. We
and
don't have,
that's exactly the feeling that I think one should feel when they talk to you or talk to someone with these goals, because you're talking about the secrets to, there's this quote, I think you've heard me say it before, but I found it from Marceau in 1960. He says, an art dies for the lack of creators and the lack of schools. And schools should be serious. It's a regimen of discipline that needs to be, studied for a period of time. And, the survival of of culture and art itself requires creators and schools and education, which is serious.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about your teaching and how you go about teaching what you do, specifically working with mime and using mime in your teaching.
Yeah. Well, first of all, about teaching in general and schools in general, I'm very passionate about that, so I'd like to touch that topic. I'm very pro formal education.
Me too.
Very pro. So with formal diplomas, etc., it wouldn't be there if it wasn't important. And on the other hand, the answer why, because kids today always ask why, I always tell my students, they don't like this and they don't like that, and they think that this can be better taught, and why don't we learn this and we learn that? I said, you're right, and they're right. But what school gives you a safety net. So in 3 years or 4 years of university education, you get a safety net. So you can learn one technique, maybe. You can touch 3, 4, 5, 6, 10 other techniques. Touch them, experience them a little bit. Fine. And the most important thing, you can learn how to research and how to teach yourself.
Mm.
And with that one technique that you learn, that's your safety net.
Mm-hmm.
So Marcel Marceau's technique, fine. Very well, I know it. When I don't know what to do, when I'm trying to work on a show and I try to do things and I research and I try to experiment and I try to find some new things, my technique, my new language, something new, you are motivated and inspired and full of energy and you do it, but then you get to a wall and you don't know what to do. And we all have that moments when we don't know what to do and how to do it. But then you have a safety net. You go back to the basics, to the technique that you learned at school. So
Mm-hmm.
then you start from the beginning and you do it that way. So that way the production is not in danger because you'll come out on time. You are not in danger because if nothing else, what you do on stage will be okay.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really important especially if you're doing a show with other people, you have to be on a certain level. You don't have to be the best, but you have to be a good support for the others too. So
Right.
It's not all about you, it's about the show.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So kind of Eastern Europe still, well, now we're really, really hardly influenced by American culture and Anglo-Saxon culture, which is very narcissistic culture. It's all about me. It's not about it's not about the team and group, etc. But it's really important to do the show and to do it properly. So we are all experimenting, but we have a safety net. So we can have the courage to do it because we know that we won't be falling down flat on our faces. But we have a safety net, and that's what gives you in 3 or 4 years, and that's perfect. That's enough.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's enough.
And how do you do your teaching? Are you a part of a university, or do you do teaching
I,
in?
I was till like 3 years ago. I stopped teaching officially at the university. I am an associate professor. I think that's like just a level
Yeah, yeah.
below the full professor
Uh-huh.
at the
A
university.
lot of mimes only become associate professors because the academic people are mystified and intimidated somewhat by mimes. And so they never, sometimes, at least in our university system, they never allow them into the upper palace very often, because the mimes are
Well,
still fools, and the mimes point out the political and social
yeah,
problems within the system.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
that's why we have to fight for it. And
Yeah.
that's why I would really love that our conference becomes also a conference where you can gather, because as a professor you have to write papers and to go to conferences, but those conferences have to be recognized by the Ministry of Education so that you can gather some points, etc., because for that you for your PhD thesis and blah blah blah. So I want our conference to. That's why I would like our conference to be that serious, so
Well,
that
I think the connection with the what's the group? God, my mind is slipping. The World Theater Organization that
the
we have.
international theater.
Yeah, talk briefly about that relationship that's developed between.
Yeah, well, in 2000, I wrote. We wrote a letter of inviting other organizations to cooperate, and we sent it to a couple of international organizations in the world, and we got a response immediately from the International Theatre Institute, which operates within UNESCO. Which is wonderful. And in 2017, we became global partners. So now we are partners. And since last year or so, we on our initiative on the initiative of the World Mime Organization, we started. For now, it's called the working group, but hopefully it will become a committee, which means more serious.
Yeah, I missed that committee.
For the a working group for physical theater. So, and this is the first time the International Theatre Institute has working groups and committees and sections for all sorts of theaters, for musical, for monodrama, for writers, etc., but never had a group dealing with physical theater. So we established that now as an inter-organizational working group between.
Yeah. Fantastic.
That's really wonderful. What are your goals for that? How is that going to play out?
Well, we still don't really know. It's again all about communication and all about exchange of knowledge and experience between people that are dealing with physical theater in general. So it's not only mine. So it's physical theater in general, not dance. But nowadays, I think that we are always trying to put things in folders and files. But nowadays, I think that really those boundaries between contemporary dance and physical theater and mime, and there is also dance theater. And people tell me that physical theater and nonverbal theater are not the same thing. So it's kind of confusing because I think that theater in general in the world now is in a new era of exploration. Not only because of all the technology that we have nowadays, but people are always talking about avant-garde theater and avant-garde this and avant-garde that. And I believe that that avant-garde is something that happened.
It's so interesting. The word.
So I think that right now we are in the research. Theater is in general in the research of the new avant-garde.
It's so interesting because you're saying this because mime. To do mime, let's call it mime in general, but the mime is what the writer, very often the writer, the creator, the director, the philosopher, the politician, the dancer, the clown, the acrobat, the athlete, the poet. There's like we were saying earlier, mime is difficult to do because there's all these influences and all these worlds of ingredients that come into creating the mime show, right?
Mm.
And that is a very, a large plate, but like you say, the world might be ready to embrace that kind of, because everything is coming together, in terms of, so, and mime is the art of the synthesis of all these elements of theater and literature. And, it's an amazing art form that really almost, it's like a modern art form. It's a timeless art form. I mean, that's pretty much, if you look at what we're talking about now.
I think also that's the reason why these conversations that James and I are having with different mimes around the world, I think that's why it's so interesting, is because they're not just performers, they're creator performers. So they have this sort of goal about what they're.
Hey!
You hear some?
It's
Marko,
getting hot. It's getting hot. Put it out. Put it out. Put it out.
You feel the heat?
Oh.
Oh, it's getting worse. You're feeling hot?
Oh, it's that time. It's rapid fire time.
Okay.
You feel the heat, Marko? Are you ready?
The heat? The heat's
you ready for a game?
Yes.
The heat is gonna come to you in a moment. So we're gonna play a game. This probably will take you back to your comedy shows or whatever. And this is called rapid fire. And what it is I'm going to give you a word and you're going to do an association. This is verbal reaction to the phrases. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Quick as you can. Laser leaf.
What's a laser leaf?
Good. Spotlight. Hands. Eyes. Sweat. Very good. Child.
Oh, hello.
Elder.
What?
Props. Mask. Velvet sun.
Oh.
Age.
Nah.
Failure.
Oops.
Critic.
No.
Moving faster now. Teacher. Fame. Fame. Language.
Me only.
Would you repeat that, please? I love that. Fame.
Look at me only.
Language. Future. And finally, suspended sneeze. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. That was round 2 of Rapid Fire. Bravo, Marko. Bravo.
Marko, all those wonderful sound effects remind me of the videos that I've been watching of you. There's a series that were called Mr. Comedy, and some that were about curling. And they remind me of like a silent film because they're kind of speeded up. But the sound effects that you put with them, the gibberish and the reactions, they're great fun to watch too. And I hope that we can put a link to them so that people can see those videos. How did all of those videos come about?
Well, Com Addy actually was a game that I did on television every Saturday in one variety program on Serbian national television. That was in 1997 or 8 or so. And I had like my 5 minutes. And at that time, well, no, it was 1997 maybe. So the audience had to see what I was doing on television, and then they had to buy a newspaper and then cut out a small coupon where they would write the answer and then send it to the TV station and maybe win an award. Nowadays, you do all of that on your phone, you know, or over internet, but that was then. So I did that for a couple of months, and I kept some of the tapes. So then later on, when YouTube came, I edited a couple of those and I named them. I experimented to see what kind of personage, what kind of person I can play, and how can I name it. So I named it Comedy. I just played with it.
You know, it's interesting.
The other one was like a trio of performers, and it had to do with your curling champions, right?
Yes. It was with my assistant at that time, Bojan Mijatovic, who also is an actor. But I actually, well, in 2006. We went to Canada to play curling for the first time for 10 days. We practiced curling, and right after that, a couple of days after that, in December, we went. So that was November. In December, we went for our first European Championships. So I organized, because we didn't have any money. At that time, I was playing a children's show in one really famous children's theater here in Belgrade. And I already knew people in Canada that were organizing shows for Serbian community, because the year before I was there with another political satire group and show that we did. And I said to Bojan, he was my student and later my assistant. I told him, look, the actor that I was playing with, he was afraid of flying, so he didn't want to go to Canada. And I said to Bojan, look, I will put you in the show. You'll get your chance as an actor, but you will have to stay in Canada, and all the money that we earn, you will have to spend it to learn how to play curling. And he said, what? I said, curling. Don't bother. I'll teach you everything. I don't know anything about curling. I never stepped on ice, but we'll stay there, use our money that we earn and stay there. And we stayed for 9 days, learned 10 days and practiced, and then went to the Europeans and actually won 2 games at the Europeans, which was extraordinary. And later we did, Bojan and I did that comedy part on YouTube. And with the guy, the third person is actually an American YouTuber of Serbian origins. And actually, from him, I learned that you have to do YouTube as your daily full-time job if you want to succeed. Because I opened my channel in 2006, and I still have like 400 or maybe 500 followers, and that's it. Because I didn't do it on a regular basis. I put a video, then for 6 months, nothing. And then maybe later on another video. And I mean, just when I feel like it and when I have something to put on, I never treated YouTube as a full-time job. And from him, I actually learned that it is a full-time job. So I decided not to do it.
You know, it's interesting. When you were doing the rapid fire, the verbal section was a lot of sounds. There wasn't necessarily words. And so that I always thought that sound is a gesture and gesture is a sound. So it's interesting, you know, we've been talking about communication and mind, but even though you were using sound and some words, they were still gestures. And then again, you know, and then again, the movements became sound, you know, the movement became a voice. So that's an interesting brain that operates like that. That's communication.
I'm full into genre. This is mime radio, so I had to do mime for radio.
No, it makes perfect sense. I'm totally a fan of that and appreciate that.
Well,
go ahead.
English is not my mother tongue, so I'm not really, it's kind of difficult to do the verbal associations, and it was easier for me to do the.
Yeah, like
Oh,
laser leaf. Was that a real question, or were you just
no,
playing
that
with
was the question. What is laser leaf?
Well,
We don't know.
it's a zing, zing,
Uh,
zing. Oh, it's a laser, laser in a leaf.
See, it makes sense to James.
Makes sense to me.
But I do want to say that your English is much better than our Serbian, although you did teach us to say dobra jutro,
yes, sir.
which is good morning, right?
Yeah.
So, of all of the places you've gone in the world for your work, Marko, what's your favorite place?
Ooh, yeah, interesting question. I really had good time, and I really love that city. It's Edinburgh. I love Edinburgh.
Yeah.
And during the festival, everything is theater there. Even in Avignon, it's the same thing, because you have, during 1 month, you have like 15,000 performances of different shows. And everybody's an actor, so people go in and out of pubs, theaters, garages, so you have shows everywhere.
That sounds wonderful.
Oh, I love it. I really love it. So for a long time, I lived in Paris for 3 years. Edinburgh was for me probably one of the most beautiful cities. I loved it better than Paris. I mean, Paris is nice.
Do you have any disaster stories? Any disaster stories during these trips of touring, or any being a comedian? Is there any kind of interesting story that might have happened to you in the flesh on these travels?
Wherever I go, for whatever reason, I mean theatrical reasons. If I go to teach, I did master classes at different universities. In Stockholm, in Sofia, Bulgaria, in Tbilisi, in Shanghai, etc. Wherever I go, I always tell to people that organize those events, I tell them, look, if you have, I mean, this is kind of my personal mission. Not really a mission, because that would mean that I think of myself too high, and I don't. I like working with children, with deaf children, and I started doing that in 1996 or so, and I do that from time to time, not on a regular basis, but it depends when I have time or not, and I usually do that with in schools for the deaf. And I offer to people, I said, okay, I'm coming to do the show or to do a class and to get paid for it. But they usually say, okay, if you have some deaf children and if you can organize it, I'd like to do a free class of mime or a whole seminar or a workshop of mime with deaf children. I mean, I'm there. I do classes a couple of hours per day or a show in the evening. So I have time and I want to do it. And it's part of sharing. And arts in general are about sharing, especially performing arts. You give. You don't ask anything in return, you give. Maybe you'll get back some applause, or maybe even get paid at some point. But give, and you don't ask for anything. So I say, okay, can you organize that? And I did the same thing in Tbilisi in 2015, 16, 17, I don't know. I told them the same thing, and they say, okay, no problem, we'll try to arrange something. And just 2 days before I went there, they called me and they asked me, look, children are on holidays at the moment, but would you do a workshop in women's prison? I said, sure, why not? So, look, I mean, Georgia is not, I mean, it's Eastern Europe, but it's not really close to Serbia, and it's not somewhere where you would plan to go as a tourist. it's a wonderful country, beautiful country, and everybody should see it. But it's a small country, and I mean, we go to Greece during summer holidays, or to Egypt, or seacoast, Turkey, or somewhere. You don't plan to go to Georgia, so I went to Georgia, and I never thought in my entire professional life, especially when I was 16 and enrolled at the university, that I would be going at some point of my career to Georgia, to a women's prison, to teach mime to women who killed their husbands. So,
My.
I never thought of that. So you really never know where mime will will take you in your career.
Did it turn out okay?
No, it was wonderful. I did a workshop. They were great. We did it in a. I went through all the security part of the prison. We did it in a library. But after that, I couldn't. I did a workshop for like 3 or 4 hours. But after that, I couldn't speak for another 3 or 4 hours. Also.
Yeah.
Hard.
Wow.
It was a hard experience.
Oh yeah. I mean, they were great, very happy, etc., etc. But you can feel certain energy, and it was emotional. It was quite disturbing. I mean,
It wasn't really a disaster story. It was more of a
no, it's not a
cathartic revelation of
yeah
an aspect of the world that you hadn't experienced before. Yeah,
Amazing.
it was like a hurricane came or a tornado, in terms of disasters, and yeah.
Well, if you want disasters, I was in 2014. We had really bad floods in Serbia, really bad floods, and at that time, I was not. I was abroad somewhere for a couple of days. I came back, and I knew that we had to do something. I was at that time general manager of Belgrade Youth Center, which is a very big cultural center with cinema, theater, and concert halls in the center of Belgrade. And in a couple of days, we organized the biggest rock and roll concert, humanitarian rock and roll concert, charity concert in that in that space. And we waited for like 10 days, 15 days, because some people died. We didn't want to go immediately with music and fun, but we did that with Serbian Red Cross. And for instance, that if it has nothing to do with mime, it has to do with art and performing arts and rock and roll. But that was great. But another disaster that I will remember all my life, personal disaster, is my diploma work. I did La Moschetta, The Midge, by Ruzzante. It's Commedia dell'arte. And fortunately, in Commedia dell'arte, you can improvise, because I didn't learn my text well for my diploma work.
Oh, dear.
Very unusual. And that was, I had diarrhea. That was the first and last time before I went on stage. Sorry about that. But later on, I also had diarrhea when I was directing, but never when I was acting.
Oh, dear.
Oh, good. Let's change the subject. Let's talk about legacy.
This is important. Sorry. This is important. This is important, because that's how I learned that directors, the most important thing for a director that to learn is that at certain point, the show that he or she is directing stops being their show, and it becomes the show of actors on stage. Mm-hmm. So like 10 days or a week before the opening, you don't need a director anymore, because it's, sorry, my dogs are barking. So it stops being the show of the director, and it becomes the show of actors. So he shouldn't. When I direct, so for the last week or so before the opening, I don't even come to rehearsals. I do the technical stuff, the lights, etc., etc. But I don't work with actors anymore. It's their show. It's not mine anymore. So. And that's a very difficult thing to learn.
What about your legacy? Like, how do you want your energy to continue, or is that interesting to you at all, or is something that you think about? The Marko's legacy.
Well, I do think I'm 50, so half a century. So I started thinking about that, and I do think about it very often. I stopped doing institutional acting and shows on a regular basis like 7 or 8 years ago, because we had a flood of reality shows on our television, and the quality of screenplays really went down. Now it's coming up, and there's an explosion of TV production here in Serbia. And we have quite a few of co-productions also, foreign productions coming to Serbia to film. I did, for instance, like, I don't know, a few years ago, a film Coriolanus with Ray Fiennes and Gerard Butler. Small role, but nevertheless, because our government is now giving incentives to foreign productions and to co-productions, so that's good. But I'm not really that much involved in theater anymore and in production here. I was more turned to teaching and to charity work. I did a lot of charity work in past 10 years. But now I started thinking going back on stage. I did a show. It's called Still Awaiting Heaven. It was Awaiting Heaven, a show that I did 25 years ago. It's a mime, non-verbal show, physical theater. A love story between a Serbian peasant and a classical ballerina.
I thought, I watched that, and I felt there was cultural elements that you were studying in depth, some social movements and cultural aspects of Serbian experience. Yes. I felt there were several levels playing on that.
Oh yes,
in that production,
Yes, especially it's a show that we did 25 years ago, so that means in 90s, during the wars that we have and the crisis, huge financial crisis that we had, and a cultural crisis, and the crisis of social values, because that was the time where criminals were most popular, and starlets, or how do you call them? Nowadays it's becoming a reality show star, reality personality. That's something I found in Western media.
Celebrities
from reality shows. Not so you don't have to have any kind of school or any kind
of, it's just who you are. You
just go have sex in front of cameras with everybody and fight with each other, and you become a star. Why not?
So do you see your legacy as being a performer or a teacher or the organizer of communication amongst mimes?
Well, probably that third thing, organizer of communication, or getting people together, bringing people.
Yeah, it's that's a very valuable and beautiful thing. What kind of advice would you give to young artists, specifically young artists that are interested in performing as mimes or discovering physical theater?
Go to a proper school, learn what you can during year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, and then go out and to the world and find your way. And never treat your audience. Always treat your audience with respect and love. Never. It doesn't matter who is in your audience. I know I have colleagues here also who say, I'm going to that city, and we played the show, but it was for working class. How do you call them?
Working class, blue collar. We say blue collar or something.
I never did that. For me, an audience is an audience. And a few days ago, when I received that golden badge, they asked. There was a few of us on stage. They asked us to do a little something. And there another a wonderful violin player and another accordion player, but that play our folk music. They also received, two of them received the Golden Badge. And I did like a paraphrase of a citation of Marcel Marceau's piece on life, starting from a baby, a child, and dying at the end.
7 Ages of Man, that piece. Yeah.
I did that in like 2 minutes or so, or 3 minutes. And the two guys that were in our national costumes, you see that they are self-taught musicians, and that they're really deeply into our national music. When the ceremony was finished, they came out and they said, you did the whole life in 3 minutes. So they understood. And for me, that was probably the greatest award that I received out of during
that connection.
I'm glad you mentioned the figure behind you. I was going to ask you if that's who you want to be when you grow up, or it's deeper than that. But here's the question: what do you want to be when you grow up, Marko?
Who do I want to be when I grow up?
When you grow up, yeah.
I just like to be an actor on stage and in front of camera. I like camera. I like movies, especially in my age. It's a one-time effort. You don't have to go for months and months and do the same thing over and over again. You do it once.
Well, wait till you get to be my age, then we'll see what you're thinking. Yeah.
Marko, it's been a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much for joining us on the Mime Radio Show.
Thank you very much, Marko. That was really a thoughtful and a very enjoyable experience for us. That's it, ladies and gentlemen. Mime Radio with Marko Stojanovic. And goodbye.
Thank you for listening to the Mime Radio Show. Join us in 2 weeks for an interview with Marguerite Matthews. Please like and subscribe, and check out our website, mimeradioshow.com.